Great to have you. Join me instead this morning on ITV as we x-ray issues on what the country is up to. This new year 2022 and Buhari's 2022 top 3 agenda is what we're going to be looking at and discussing this with me. I have a one-time gubernatorial aspirant in Edo State, and he is a politician and also a business expert. Honorable Fred Uyigwe. Thanks for joining me, Fred.
I thank you very much for having me. Good morning to you viewers.
It's a new year, and we're still basking in the euphoria.
It's
yes.
all right to say
yes.
Happy New Year
Of course,
to
yes.
the viewers.
Yes, we're still basking in the euphoria, and
Yes,
there are expectations that Nigerians have about the government, just as the president also has his own expectations from Nigerians. So, what do you make? It's a new year. What do you see as your expectations for the presidency?
Of course, the president who wants Nigerians to key into its program and to take a critical look at the budget, which has just been passed and which has just been signed, and to be able to key in and run with it, for a collective benefit. The budget as it is has a lot, it's very comprehensive.
Of course it is.
And very interestingly so. But also with very sad notes.
And being that it's a deficit budget. So a lot of financing will come in.
Right. Because what we do have in the main, it's more of the same, like we have always had. It's just like having a few increases on what we had in the previous years.
Okay.
And the only addition I saw, which which is of note, is an allocation to e-Naira propagation.
So what you mean is that the 2022 budget is not a spectacular one?
It is not spectacular in as much as it did not take into consideration, it did not seem to appreciate the critical sectors that we really need to be focusing on at this point in time. The rest of the world out there is moving in leaps and bounds. And it's high time we keyed in so that we can be in lockstep with the developments going on outside of Nigeria. And to be able to do that, we need to look inwards to see what our strength is or where our strengths lie. And one of the areas that I had hoped the budget would look at critically, it's the youth and sports development.
Okay.
Okay. Because we have a very viral youth population. Okay. And we have a large population of graduate youths. But nothing in the budget captured projecting this group to be able to accomplish more. Because that is a resource that is waiting to be tapped. We have trained our children, they have gone to school, they have graduated, they have now a reservoir of knowledge that they need to deploy. So there ought to have been something in the budget to help that cause.
Okay.
Okay. And I didn't quite see that because what was allocated to youth and sports development was kind of paltry, just about 15 billion naira.
Okay.
Okay. In the budget, what comes across is that the insecurity problem is still a huge challenge because almost 1 trillion naira was allocated to security. Okay. And that is quite huge.
Okay.
Okay. And then we have to also consider what was allocated for debt servicing. debt servicing comes to about 36%, which is quite high. But you cannot run away from paying your debts. So you have to pay the interest and pay some of the principal in order to be able to liquidate the debt over time.
Okay.
So that is huge. Borrowing to finance a budget is not something that should actually be frowned upon, but it's something that we should be able to appreciate, because most of the developments that are critical to advancing the economy may not be able to be funded locally or domestically. So you have to reach out to be able to do that. Okay,
thank you. Thank you very much. You've been able to show some expression in terms of what the budget could be coming up with, and the challenges that you have about the budget. But, well, that's just a point of digression for us to look at what expectations we have in terms of the new year 2022. Again, let's look at the topic critically, looking at the top 3 agenda of the president this year. We can't say that it's far-fetched from the 3 capsules that the president came with on board, which has to do with the economy, making sure that we have a very viable economy, and looking at the need to tackle insecurity, and of course also tackle corruption. Now, this happens to be another top 3 agenda of the president this year, 2022. Now, it's gone through 7 years of administration. So what do you make of his efforts in this direction of driving the wheels in ensuring that we have development in these 3 capsules?
Might I start from the anti-corruption campaign?
Okay. Well, there's also need to look at that because
anti-corruption campaign, in the main, has been a failure, I would say. So to just be reiterating that it's a fight against corruption, it's to insult the intelligence of Nigerians, because we are not seeing anything different from before the president came into power. You know, we had high hopes, high expectations of what will happen. When the whistleblower program was introduced, we were all excited. They were all also very disappointed when eventually it was cracked within a very short period of time.
But wouldn't it be wrong if you say we were all, because you are only projecting your opinion? So it's going to surprise you that some other persons may also say that it did brilliantly in that direction. Okay.
Nigerians, I'm speaking for the majority, I believe, of Nigerians, because I don't believe that we want to live in a corrupt society. I don't believe Nigerians actually want to live in a, overly corrupt society. There is no society that is free of crime. There's no society that is entirely free of corruption, okay? But that's not an excuse to embrace such a vice, such an economic malady. For one, like I often say, corruption is not exportable. And what I mean by that is that to the extent that there's a corrupt element in any product or service, and then you try to go into a competition, domestically or internationally, you are going to undermine your competitive ability by the degree of which there's corruption embedded in the service or the product that you are trying to sell.
All right.
So those are things we must take into consideration.
All right.
So corruption is one that I will score this administration very low on, and I don't see how anything can change my mind for now.
All right, Fred Igwe, thank you for sharing your thoughts in this direction. A lot we're going to be looking at. You just raised a point in terms of
corruption.
Oh yes, on corruption. And I know that maybe in the course of this show, there could be a brighter side that you'll be scoring the administration as we look forward to a brighter day. Well, as TMI, we're going to be extending the frontiers of this discussion in a short while. Do stay with us.
Starting from this new year.
It's a new year, 2022, and of course, looking at Buhari's top 3 agenda for the year, and it's not far-fetched, like I said earlier, from what he has been talking about, even in the slogan of change, and even as he came on board newly as president in 2015, where he made mention of the fact that he's going to ensure that the economy is viable, and of course, tackling corruption, and of course fighting insecurity. These 3 measures, what has been done so far, and if he is still counting on this as top 3 agenda for the year 2022, what are the measures or viable objectives that he will be bringing on board this time to change the narrative? Nigerians seem not to really be happy, with what has been done so far in the administration of the dear president, Muhammadu Buhari. Well, the president will say he has done his best, and some will also say the best isn't good enough. And discussing this, I still have Honorable Fred Oyigwe with me. Thank you for sustaining the discussion with me.
Thank you again for having me.
And of course, while we had that break, we had a very, very beautiful opportunity to have the presence of the president of Association for Formidable Education and Development, AFED, as Edo State chapter. And he is also the African Director of Africa Emancipation Project. He is a social media influencer. Talking about Osagie, God sent Erunse. Thanks for joining me, Osagie.
Good morning, viewers. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Yeah, it's a new year, so let's get a bite on your expectations this year for the government.
Anyway, if you want to get my take on that, I will toe the line of the one-time president of this country, Obasanjo, who said we shouldn't expect anything more, if you want to ask me, at the federal level.
Isn't that a pessimistic point of view?
It's not being pessimistic. Philip, we're in this country, and when people try to galvanize things in the name of political rhetorics, you ask yourself, how does it affect, what is the reality to the common man? There's a difference between having a good paperwork, good paper talk, good press presentation, and trying to make sure, because you are the Minister of Information, to galvanize everything and make it seem as if, and the reality are passing through. So by the reality we've had for over 6 years of this administration, are you telling me that they are going to perform the magic in just less than 2 years? Oh, forget about it. For me, I'm not expecting anything more. I think what we are seeing from the present administration at the federal level is the best the guy got to give. And for me, it's sad. Because if at this time, this is where we are for over 6 years, with all the major critical promises, it would be nice, maybe as we, this discussion, move on, to go into a little bit into history and look at where we were at 2015 and where we are now. If you look at the national mood, the body language of Nigerians in 2015, it was anything else beside PDP. There was this national frustration. People felt like we have had enough. But today, the narrative is so different that people are like, oh, even when we felt so tired in 2015, it was even like a bed of roses compared to where we are today. So the man I've told you he has done his best, even in the recent interview, you know, he has told the whole world. Any attempt to call him to question him, he would deal with that individual. So what else do you expect? He said the records are there. So as far as the president is concerned, this is the best he had to give. You just said it. He said he has done his best. So what else do you expect from a man that have concluded that he has done his best? Because for me, best is not best until it yields the desired change and influence.
Okay, Nigeria happens to be a country that has a heterogeneous background. We have different challenges that the president inherited. So if you look at what it was then, you know, even basically looking at insecurity and how more about some communities were already submerged or overwhelmed by this. In 2015, didn't you see there was a quite of liberation? You know, so I don't think you also see that as a score point.
If you are trying to tell me or tell Nigerians that insecurity or the security of Nigerians is better off today than it was in 2015, for me that is very laughable. It's very laughable. You know, because if you are trying to say yes, there were some local government or territories that were under the rulership of non-state actors, I mean the Boko Haram, in 2015. What about now? I mean, it's in your profession. I was watching a documentary the other day in one of these TV channels, and some of these farmers were being interviewed. You know what they said? As at late last year, they have to pay special taxes or premium to bandits for them to go to farm. There was a community, I can't remember the name of the community, that failure to measure up with the certain amount that was demanded by Boko Haram, they meted mayhem on them. Just they were demanded some certain amount of money, they couldn't meet up, but they were able to raise part of it. So which is worse off? So when you say some of the territories that were under Boko Haram have been taken away, what about the farmer elders crisis that have escalated? What about banditry that have come into the picture? What about the situation where it is now norm? It is the norm to be a terrorist, as in it's no longer a big deal. What about the situation where up till now, like a lot of people have said even in different public fora, we are still waiting for the prosecution of some of these perpetrators of these negative acts, of that Stanley activities.
Okay, okay.
So, which is better?
I'll come back to you.
Because for me, I think the situation have gotten even more critical and
I'll come back to you. Before now, before we had Osage Godson on the platform, you also scored the president low in terms of the corruption fight. But let's look at your bite in tackling insecurity.
Like Mr. Sagi has said, the fight against Boko Haram or terrorism has been also disappointing. During this administration, over the past 6 years, 2 other groups have reared their heads. The herders, the cattle herders, and then the bandits. Some say the bandits and the cattle herders are one and the same with the Boko Haram, but that doesn't seem to be true. But we have come to a point where even a state governor, the governor of Katsina, has pleaded with the people to now arm themselves to protect themselves.
It seems like a helpless situation.
I mean, when you call it a helpless situation, it's also an admission of failure to provide security. By the time you say, help yourself, resort to self-help, it means you have admitted your failure. And that is an admission on behalf of the federal government that, yes, we have failed. And like I mentioned earlier, the budget allocation for fighting insecurity, it's about 999 billion out of a 17 billion naira budget, 17.1 billion naira budget.
So that component is dropping a lot in the budget.
That is the biggest component of the budget of any sector. Okay, so that goes to tell us that, because when you are spending so much money on, when you are spending so much money on a venture that doesn't yield direct fruits.
Okay.
Okay. Then you are taking away from monies that ought to have been used for capital expenditure that will galvanize the economy, that will project the economy, that will advance the economy. What was budgeted for capital expenditure is about 5 trillion. And that of recurrence is about 6 trillion. And then you have a trillion for capital, for fighting or for defense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Which of course we include a component of recurrent expenditure for defense. But the larger part of that expenditure or allocation is for fighting insecurity.
Was that not expected, looking at the position we are in at present?
It was expected. But the thing is, year in, year out, we had a civil war in this country. Okay, that involved 1/3 or thereabout of the size of the territory of Nigeria. And that war ended in 30 months. Here is one that has lasted now for about 8 years, 9 years, and it's ongoing, and there is no end in sight. That's the painful part of it. There is no end in sight. So, I believe the president should think about new strategies. I had the privilege at one time to talk to late Dr. Ugbemudia, who we know too was a military administrator. And he said one thing, as a military expert, that all that is needed is to cut off the supply chain to these bandits. Identify the supply chains and cut them off. The bandits, for example, they are getting money now, they are now levying taxes, like Mr. Sage just pointed out, levying taxes on communities. Then they also engage in kidnapping, and then generate revenues from that source. All these are sources that should be truncated so that you can starve them of their resources. The ability to starve them of their resources is within the public. I mean, wasn't that
what the federal government also did by taking them off the network, the telecommunications network? Don't you think that also helped in tackling this area of insecurity?
That helps. And let us give some credit. No, let us give some credit to the administration for eventually coming around to declare the bandits as terrorists.
Okay.
Okay. That took a long time coming. Everybody. Let me not say everybody, because I know you don't like that word, everybody.
Because we can't generalize.
We cannot generalize so much. But a whole lot of people had clamored for designating the bandits as terrorists. But eventually, that has been done. That now gives the international community opportunity to partner with Nigeria in that fight. Because once an organization is branded as a terrorist organization, it is also assumed that it has the potential of destabilizing not just the region, but also exporting their nefarious acts. So international communities take note of such designations, and then they lend assistance. So we are hoping that we will begin to enjoy that very soon.
All right, thank you very much. You just made mention of that, and declaring bandits as terrorists. Don't you think that is also laudable? And that's a direction that will bring better things in terms of fighting insecurity, Osage?
Yes, it's laudable. But there is difference between designating a certain people as terrorists or making a certain pronunciation or pronouncement and having the political will to tackle the issue. You know, these are two different things. Now they have been designated as terrorists, which is a fine and a welcome development. But don't also forget that prior to this time, even when the international community decided to partner with the Nigerian government towards abating this very awkward situation of insurgents and banditry, the US started that, and even the Niger, what did the government came up with? They had to withdraw their troop and said Nigerian government is not ready to tackle insurgency. Now these are the issues, and going further, if you have some kind of relationship with some of these men in uniform, you start to ask a lot of questions. I know some few of them, and that got me talking and asking questions and saying, how can we have experts from America? And they said, we are not ready. I've watched that interview elaborately, where one of the troops that came gave the reasons why the American government said, we were not ready to tackle our issues. Don't also forget that it was one time a military head of state that said, I'll paraphrase, that any act of insurgency that lasts more than 48 hours, there's a very high level of suspicion about the lack of political will on the part of the government to arrest.
The government is involved.
Yes, that the government is involved.
That was the statement.
That was actually what he said. I was just trying to be economical with the truth. But this is not, yes, Abacha, this is not even trying to be economical with the truth, because we have lost it. You know, every day, do you know on daily basis, Philip, people are being killed in this country?
Well, I think we don't need to overhit.
We have to talk about it, because for us, we can't wait for the next election.
I know your expression may want to tend to raise sentiment, but I think you said let's still look at the logical aspect in terms of this fight against insecurity and even the bombardment of the hideouts of these terrorists. You know, yes, where their leaders, you know, were hit by it and killed as a result of the Super Tucano aircraft. The deployment of this, don't you think it won't be right for us to just remain pessimistic, to also look at the brighter side in terms of what the deployment has come up with? I think I'll get back to your, I'll get to you, right, but let's get your expression in that regard.
You see, the cost of this is incalculable.
Yeah.
Okay? You cannot begin to fathom how many people are dislocated and displaced, what the cost of displacement and dislocation is, because it's huge. You have whole swaths of territories, whole communities that are displaced. The economic activities truncated.
But looking at the military aircraft, the deployment of the Super Tucano aircraft, and the bombardment of these areas, a lot we expected in this direction. And even when the Super Tucano aircrafts were being deployed, it was a welcome development. And so, don't you think what is greeting the new stream at present is quite appreciated?
If we must take that very statement that he just quoted seriously, that any act of insecurity that lasts, or any act of insurgency that lasts over 48 hours presupposes that there is involvement by government actors. Then it behooves us to begin to task the government and to account for their actions.
But we can't take that. We can't take that as a fact.
No.
We can't even take that as a theory. But it's just the thinking of the originator.
A former head of state and a military general. Okay. The thing is, what has this administration done to challenge themselves, to look inwards, to find whether the problem is internal rather than external? Okay, we know the reason for Boko Haram. It's a cornucopia of reasons. You have those who are Islamic fundamentalists, who are members of Boko Haram because of their belief systems. There are those who, for economic reasons, for economic frustrations, decide to join them. There are those who are attracted because I think it was out there in the media too, that Boko Haram, I think maybe I should not be saying this.
Yeah, because you have not really cleared the fact.
Because
no to Western education.
Because because I don't want to encourage the set.
Okay.
That they pay more than the military does pay. So if you now bring your own situation, your own military, to a position where they believe that those they are fighting against earn more money than themselves, what do you think would be the
outcome,
motivation of those who are supposed to fight the insurgents? They will lose their motivation to fight. So these are all things we need to take a look at. We have to look at the remuneration of our soldiers. How well are they taken care of? What happens when our soldiers are injured in the course of fighting insurgency? So do we have a robust healthcare system to provide for those who are injured and for the families of those who are dead? So these are some of the things we must also look at, because you are not going to just send people to go to war. And then in times past, our soldiers complained that they did not have sophisticated arms to fight the insurgents.
Don't you think that has improved now?
Yes.
Don't you think that has improved now?
That is what we are told. The truth is,
he said that's what we are told.
That's what we are told, that has improved. But as Mr. Sagi has said, the reality on ground is that before now, we did not have insurgents demanding levies and taxes from communities. Now we have insurgents boldly demanding levies and taxes from communities.
Okay, the aspect of tackling insecurity is not really unique with the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. We've had this challenge of insecurity, navigating through the administrations we've had so far.
Not to this level.
Okay, but let's look at changing the narrative. Now, some states have come up with the state policing theory as a way out, as a panacea, in tackling insecurity. And just recently, the president said he doesn't believe that's an option to think about in terms of tackling insecurity. What do you make of that statement without being pessimistic?
I've not been pessimistic, Philip. I've only been realistic.
Oh, really?
We are living in a real world, and we have to be able to tackle issues realistically. There's a point I was going to raise while my leader was making his point. You see, there's something about social trust that I think this administration lacks. When over time, fingers have been pointed at certain actors, to what extent have the government probed these people and brought them to book? You see, I always say this because it's easy to see a politician come and say, it's a global thing, other countries are facing this. But take note, yes, situations like this try to raise up in some other developed countries, but there were methods to tackling these issues. And like what you just pointed out, state police or local policing is, for me, I'm shocked when the president says it's not the direction to go for now or whatever be his reasons. But don't also forget, let me give you a realistic example. Like I said, it's not about being pessimistic, it's about being realistic. Do you know in some states, for example, in my state, Edo State, ever since these local guys called vigilante came in, do you know they have been, although not completely abated, but with some extent.
There seems to be a respite.
There seems to be a respite. There seems to be some level of soft landing. I applied through Bini-Auchi Road a lot, for different activities. And between 4 p.m. downwards, the people you see on the way are these vigilante guys. And don't also forget, that these people understand the mapping. Before you can trace any thick forest, there is always a community around, sort of, that possibly farm on those lands or whatever.
So this is an opportunity to motivate these guys to do more.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Because for me personally, they are not even being taken care of enough. They are not well paid. And that's the reason why I say that as long as we continue to try to make what is so simple mystical in Africa, we will always be where we are. Because it is only when it happens in Africa is a special thing. Insurgency, nobody can tackle it. Nobody can tell this one, that one. But other countries are tackling it headlong. Are you not in this country? When a foreign diplomat were kidnapped, from America, they sent their troops. I think Donald Trump was still in power then. They went there, just about few numbers of them, and released their own from the custody of Boko Haram. What does that tell you?
Without hassles.
What does that tell you, Phil?
I thought you wanted to add that.
Yes, yes. You know, because it just tells you that that's why I'm being realistic. The point is that for me, the president is not being sincere enough.
No. I think what you are missing.
No.
Like you raised an aspect of a developed country. Don't forget, there is great difference, great disparity if you want to compare a developed with developing. Some will say even underdeveloped. So don't you think that's exactly where we are, and that's exactly where we also need the assistance of developed international communities to help in this
I think you just shot yourself on the leg, because these people have come to help. You know, when you say developed, now let's take the aspect of the insecurity, for example. Beside this government, successive governments have always voted quite huge amount of money, right from the time of Buratai, and even before then, into security. But the question is, what result have we seen? Because the security issue is compounded, like my leader was saying, it's really compounded. Beyond the fact that our army have been, raising alarm that their equipment are not sophisticated enough, we're also looking at the issue of internal sabotage in the military. Because, like I said, sometimes you interact with these guys, even some of these guys that are in the heat of this fight, and they tell you they are going on a raid. They have gotten all their mapping right, and suddenly they get a call from Abuja and say, turn back. Is override. I mean, these are issues. Now, these are some of the issues that frustrated those foreign, developed countries. So if you say they are developed, we need their help, and they render help, and it seems as if they are not seeing what we want, what they expected to see, or their effort is being truncated, in order for their army not to be relegated and seen as incompetent, they have to withdraw back their troop. Now, the point is, when it comes to insecurity, what does this government need that have not been brought to the foreplay or to the forefront? Number one, state policing, let me quickly say that, is key, is sacrosanct. Like I just said, realistically, we have seen how the issue of escalated kidnapping, banditry have been reduced drastically by the coming of local vigilante.
Did you say drastically?
To a large extent, to some extent. Let me not say to some extent.
Because you can't say drastically.
But do you also say, but I can say drastically in the case of Amoteku in the West. I can say drastically in the West. Because in the West, there were cases of kidnapping even when the Amoteku came on board. But you keep on seeing a situation where they raided them, they brought those victims out. I mean, and it's laudable.
Okay.
So the issue is, when a sitting president now tells you that there's no need for state, then you start wondering. Okay. This calls for a lot of questions. What is the political will and the sincerity?
Okay, I'll come back to you. Now. Some people see this as maybe party politics or intrigues in governance. The aspect of state policing, what do you make of this and the reaction of the president?
I will also tell you that I have my fears for state policing.
Okay.
Okay. And the reason is that any police system that is not independent is susceptible to abuse.
Okay. And manipulation.
Just like what we have now with the federal government. The authority, the police authority, lies with the federal government. And the federal government uses it sometimes to suppress opposition. We know that. And if you now have state police, you are going to have the 36 governors with such powers. But there's a solution better than the state police. That is the professional policing. Professional policing is different from state policing. Professional policing is what the United States practices. But because people travel there and you see on their vehicles some state police, but they fail to see the county police, which is like local government police, and other community police systems or precincts. That is what you have. In a situation where in a police system that is professional, students are admitted into police colleges. And when they graduate, they are free to go anywhere within the country with their certificate, just like graduating with an engineering degree from a school and going to get an engineering job anywhere that has an engineer's need. You go with your police certificate, okay, police college certificate, and you join any precinct. You take reciprocity courses to familiarize you with the laws of that community or of that state. And then you begin to serve there.
You are still talking about professional policing?
That's professional policing. That is much more effective than state policing. And that is much less susceptible to abuses.
Okay, but don't you think that we may have a long way to go in that direction? I know you spent there about 3 decades in the United States, yeah, so it's expected you will speak in this direction. No, but let's see what will work for our system, because some political scientists will tell you that what doesn't work with our political culture, could be inimical.
Look, let me tell you, policing is international.
Okay.
Police system and the fundamentals of policing is international. Okay, it's the same thing. What are you combating?
All right.
You are combating criminality, basically. Okay, and they are providing security to especially weak to weak components of the society. So if you provide a state police system, professional police system, that empowers the police systems, the component police systems, to be independent, then they cannot be abused, because if a crime crosses boundaries of police precincts or jurisdictions, then you cannot, because you have influence in one jurisdiction, influence the other jurisdiction, because you will now be under investigation, or you will now be under the control of different jurisdictions to the extent that your crime or your infraction transcends boundaries.
In as much as it's very fine looking at this paperwork, but aren't you worried about the practicability of what you just said? Because it's one thing to say this, look, it's another to drive it. And like you mentioned, even the governors, may not want to drive this, because it may not augur well in terms of driving it.
It is not rocket science at all.
Okay.
It is easier than maybe I have explained it.
But will the governors buy it?
Yes. The governors will, if they understand it. If they understand that this state police has benefits and also have disadvantages. And then you compare it to professional policing. Compared to professional policing, state police is at a disadvantage.
Okay.
Especially for the people. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to repose power with an authority that is able to use the power to suppress you.
Okay.
But if you have this community police, which now we call community police, if you have community police, then you are able to relate with them and your problems to the courts.
All right. State policing seems not to be attractive to Fred Oigwe.
No, it's not.
You see,
but it seems to be attractive to you.
Yes, yes.
Now, but aren't you worried about? Aren't you worried about the punchline he just stated? You know,
No,
because it's subject to abuse, and that again is a challenge. Don't you think we shouldn't go?
Because he has not. He has not considered professional policing.
Yes.
Okay.
You see,
don't you think that could be? Don't you think that could be on the mind of the president when he said that this is not an option to be considered?
No, it's not on his mind. If it was, he would have said it. He would have said it.
You mean nothing was on his mind?
It's not on his mind, Philip. You see, let me quickly say this. You see, good nations or great nations are governed by systems. You see, what Honorable is saying is a system. But because we react to system, because we think of, when we think averagely, we think of immediate benefit and solutions. But sometimes it doesn't work like that. You need time to be able to profound solution to some certain areas, like the insecurity we are talking about. I didn't expect the present administration to come on board and end the insecurity challenges.
Even though they said they could do it in 6 months.
Yes, even though they said they could do it in 6 months. but
you as a Nigerian, you know that it will be a difficult task to do that.
We know that it was not possible. You see, let me quickly say this, Phil. I think I have to say this. You see, within the first 100 days, there was this jubilation by the current government that they have reclaimed local governments. They have technically, at the time, they said they have technically defeated Boko Haram. Now, what happened along the line? This government drafted away from the business of government and started reacting. Till today, they are still reacting. That's when we saw the then chairman of the party came on board and say, as long as you repent, your sins are forgiven, no matter what you have done before. And the repentance is to cross carpet to the ruling party, APC. You know, that was when we saw a situation where Nigeria started saying, oh, the idea is no matter how fraudulent you are, no matter who you are, as long as you come to us, we shield it.
So you see, you
then
okay, I think you just made my point. That is an abuse. Okay,
yes.
You see, if you have a police system,
yes,
that a particular authority is able to control,
yes,
then you can stop the police system from doing their work because you control them.
Yes.
But if you have police systems scattered all over the country, like in community police,
yes,
then you cannot, from your ivory tower,
stop all of them.
All the police.
Like I said earlier, I think it's a fantastic paperwork you are saying. But who is going to make it fly?
Look at it, Phil.
Because we have the government functionaries.
For me,
who will want to influence policies that will bring about benefits to them.
I would have advocated.
So I think why that seems to be a unique one to do. We have some setbacks. You see, you made a statement,
bringing benefit to them. Okay. You see, leadership is for posterity. It's only in Africa we take leadership as synonymous, as defined as greatness. Leadership is not the definition for greatness. You are a president and you are this doesn't mean you have achieved greatness. You have only achieved greatness when you have lived for posterity, when you have saved. Because I think one of the setbacks we have had is what... Meritoriously, yes, thank you. You see, one of the setbacks we have, Phil, is what you are talking about now. When we think we don't have a long-term plan. Now, that's the reason why I always talk about the institutional fight that the then Goodluck placed in place against corruption. Even though, till today, the BVN initiative and the single treasury, which was initiated.
Yeah.
Now, these are things, what I'm saying is, some of these methods are not going to be a fast hit. But at the long run, that's the reason why I started by going into history, that nobody expected this government to completely end the insecurity issue. But we expected that, at least to a large extent, even though they had promised that they would do that, to have it under control.
I did.
But it's still out of control, and it's even worse today. Now, while we have a state policing, then what Honorable have suggested can become an alternative that is ongoing. Because I know it's going to take time to train these people. But because we are Nigerians and the kind of leaders we are, the only thing we want to do that will make the people shout is to grade one road for them or put street lights so everybody will shout.
Okay.
You will not want to invest in quality education.
I think this aspect of state policing is really calling for attention.
It can run side by side.
Like what you also said in terms of really professional policing. Yeah. Yes. Now, something happened last week in Edo State, in Bumeri and Igolo. And some are saying, well, this is the right time for the governor to place a ban, on open grazing and all of that. Now, what do you think this fight should be like now that we may be having this challenge in Edo State, looking at the criminal headsmen?
This problem persists because solutions have not been proffered. Okay? You cannot suddenly tell people who have a mindset on how to raise animal husbandry, how to pursue animal husbandry, to now change their systems without training them or without exposing them to an alternative.
Okay.
Okay? So, for years, we all grew up seeing cattle being reared along streets and all of that.
So it would be a difficult thing to get out of it.
It's not supposed to be difficult.
It's not cast in stone.
Okay, it's not cast in stone. Long ago, 50 years ago, during the time of Ogbemudia, he established a ranch in Igara, okay, that housed cattle. And if you wanted to buy cattle then, you bought cattle by weight. That was 50 years ago.
Wow.
And now, 50 years later, we are still talking of cattle rearing. It doesn't make sense. But that ought to have been proliferated. It was not proliferated. So, now that we have a new generation of cattle rearers, give them an alternative. Instead of talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, create cattle ranches. After you have created the cattle ranches, sell it to the people who are interested in it. Let them see that the advantages to ranching compared to rearing.
Okay, what you're saying is that it shouldn't be outright ban on open grazing, but create a structure, that will tackle this challenge.
Excuse me, sir. If you want to ban, as it's often done with many transitionary programs or transition programs, you graduate the time.
Oh.
Okay? You phase it out by such and such.
It shouldn't be abrupt. That's what you mean.
Yes, it shouldn't be abrupt. There should be a system.
So it should be over time. 2 years, 3 years. This is what we plan to do. And in the meantime, start putting structures in place for that replacement. You speak as a business expert that you are.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Let's get your viewpoint as we wrap up the show.
Okay, I share that opinion, really. It must be systematic. Okay. When violent beget violence, if you come with a violent attack and say, hey, this thing is getting out, there could be an issue. But my challenge is, over time, we have not seen that system put in place. It's either we have had governors saying banned or no banding. But what is the systemic approach? That's the reason why I said a lot of the things we pray for a miracle in this part of the world, can be handled, or the miracle can be brought about by a well-articulated master plan.
But do you appreciate the approach of the governor of Edo State in this regard?
And for me, what the governor has said is no, is not going the way of open banning of open graze. For me, that approach is not holistic enough. Now, this is what I'm saying. There is a double-edged sword.
It's not going to go about it the way other states are going about it.
Yes, it's not going to. Why the people? It's a double-edged sword. I think the governor should look at the two sides of the coin. What is the two sides? Number one, your people are pained and going through a whole lot because of the activities of these unscrupulous headsmen. Now, the question now is, how do you meet them at the middle? Because for some Edolites, they felt like the feeling is like the government is trying to play politics. It's trying to gain favoritism.
That's correct.
Now, that is the average feeling. Now, this system, like the system Honorable is projecting, is going to bring us to the middle ground, to be able to say, okay, I have a 3 years plan. Invite the association, the Meitiala or whatever, and say, okay, let's sit. This is a 3 years plan. These are cattle ranches, or these are saboteur. Again, I also share the opinion that is a private business. So the involvement of the government must be limited. It must be to create a framework. Because it must revolve and it must be holistic. It must be limited because I'm a private business owner. The government is not building ranching for me or trying to school me or giving me free loans. So it must be limited, but there must be a tactful...
with an exit strategy.
Yes, with an exit strategy. In 3 years' time, this is where we are going to be. But between now and 3 years, this is the alternative. Because anytime you come at people to say, stop this, they ask you, what alternative are you giving us? So I think the approach is not holistic, it's not revolving enough. Because it seems as if the government is tilting towards a particular direction at the marginalization of others. That may not be his intention, but that is the natural feelings to say, you see this man, he doesn't care about us, doesn't care about our farmland.
Not just feeling, but consequences.
Consequences too.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll be wrapping up the discuss in a few minutes, but let's look at this aspect of, because...
The economy.
No, yes, I'm going there, because, you went into the budget at the ab initio, and I really want us to look in that direction. Now, the budget, the federal budget that has come to stay, if we look at how it came up in terms of the submission of the president, the appropriation bill to the National Assembly, the benchmark of the oil price was benchmarked by the executive at 57. And now the National Assembly jacked it up to 62. There's this challenge that if the crude oil price, projection, falls below what is benchmarked, there could be some gap, some holes in the budget, which will not pan out well, for the economy. What are your worries in that direction? And how can we nip that in the bud? Because it seems to be a danger sign coming.
You see, it depends on what one believes is an acceptable swing within the prices, what the price could be, because it's a projection.
It's a projection
based on an average of maybe the past 12 months. So you take that average and you add plus or minus 5% for some. We'll do that. Some will say plus or minus 10%. And some will say plus or minus 2-3%.
But what was done, do you think is comfortable?
So the thing is, there is no risk in it. What you want to do, you want to be as close in your projection as possible to what is realistic.
Okay.
What the reality may be. Okay. In budgeting generally, you have three categories of budgets. You have the pessimistic budget, and you have the realistic budget, and you have the optimistic budget.
Okay.
So the line that the National Assembly has taken is the optimistic budgeting, pricing for oil.
Okay, but to you, that anticipation is still within safe zone.
It's still within safe zone.
Okay, thank you. I think that's exactly what I wanted you to really satisfy.
The aspect I really want to speak to is the lack of master planning for the different sectors. You mentioned about master planning.
Okay, I think we'll discuss that.
Have master planning for different sectors. We don't have that.
Thank you. We'll discuss that when we really take the push to shoves. And for now, let's rest that. Let's look at this aspect in a few minutes. The fuel subsidy removal, the plan by the federal government, and the reactions that may be hitting that plan. What do you make of this? Because this shouldn't be a New Year gift, like some would say.
Anyway, there are two sides to it. Some school of thought have said that would be a very good opinion, considering the fact that over time we will come out of it.
Okay.
Why some have said no. But there are certain questions that comes to the mind of an average Nigerian.
Yeah.
I was saying something off camera. We have to weigh things before we take actions. When you are looking at taking certain actions, first of all, what is the state of our present economy? What is the reality on ground with our people? you know, is an issue. Because it's not just enough to come and say, anyway, although it has been said severally, this is a government that said previously that what they call subsidy was a scam, you know. So when you now come up and say we want to remove subsidy, so that brings a lot of questions in the heart of Nigerians to say, I thought you said there was nothing like subsidy.
Okay, so in your own mind, to your mind, you are saying that the timing is wrong?
It's wrong. Oh. And it will be too harsh to rush into it.
All right.
Because you need to realize where we are now economically, you know, and a lot of economic indices globally and locally have pointed to the fact that economically we are not doing well at all. We are doing so poorly. An average Nigerian is struggling to survive.
Like what the World Bank report said, that yes, Nigeria could be one of the countries that have the highest rate of inflation.
Yes,
in the year 2022.
And before then, they have said Nigeria is home to the poorest people in the world. Then you now come to unemployment, 3.3% is escalating. Now you now talk about the purchasing power.
Okay.
What is our current purchasing power? Then what is the implication of the total removal of the fuel subsidy? We are battling with insufficient food. We are battling with high cost.
Thank you. You've satisfied that question. Thank you. Now, let me get your opinion. Is it timely, fuel subsidy removal? Because Nigerians may be greeted with such
if we want to be fair to Nigerians, okay, is to totally deregulate. Because, let's consider this. If you say you are subsidizing fuel, it presupposes that if a marketer, an oil importer, imports, say, 10 million barrels of fuel, okay, you are going to subsidize it in order to bring the price down to the pump price. So if that importer ends up only importing 5 million barrels and tells you he imported 10, and then you are not able to fully cross-check, then you subsidize something that never existed.
So that'll be wrong.
It's susceptible to fraud.
Yeah.
Completely deregulate. Tax the fuel sales at the pump.
Okay, but some say, well, why that is laudable to do? There should be machineries in place, you know, to cushion the effect that may come as it's removed.
Fuel is just a minor component of cost of goods and services.
Okay, so you welcome it?
Yeah, I welcome full deregulation. Full deregulation means that you allow more players into into the sector.
Okay.
Let many more people import. Then there will be real competition. And when there's real competition, the price will go down.
Thank you very much, Fred Oyugwe, for taking our time to be part of this show. And a big thanks, Osagi Godsend.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
all right,
Phil.
a lot has been said concerning what the president could be coming up with this year in order to bring about respite in the economy and, of course, fighting corruption and, of course, insecurity. Well, this will we take a short break. It's still TMI to stay.